Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from the rest of the world. Welcome to our FP2030 Partnership Fund webinar, where we are keen to look on local partnerships and how they accelerate family planning. So my name is Alex Omari. I work with FP2030 at the Eastern Southern Africa Regional Hub. Based in Nairobi, Kenya, I lead country engagement portfolio for Eastern Africa countries. Next slide. Good. So welcome everyone. Remember that we are having the webinar here, and this is our agenda. So we are going to, first of all, have opening remarks from my colleague Tagwell. Then we'll go through the presentation of FP2030's regional team. Then we'll look at the partnership fund. But remember that you are open. You can put your questions in the chat through the Q&A. But also utilize the chat box to be able to introduce yourself. Let's know where you're joining us from and where you're based. Next slide. So regarding how you can access the webinar in terms of listening in. So if you prefer to listen to the webinar in Portuguese, feel free to utilize the interpretation tab at the bottom of your screen. You will be able to see options for English and Portuguese. Kindly select the Portuguese channel. And after you select the Portuguese channel, you will be able to listen to the webinar in Portuguese. So next slide. So at this point, I'll hand over the mic to my colleague Tagwell to be able to provide us with some opening remarks, and then we'll be able to continue with the presentation. Over to you, Tagwell.
Thank you so much, Alex, for this brief. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending with the time zone your colleagues you are from. Colleagues, I'm actually delighted to have you today as part of our launch of the Partnership Fund. From me, I would like to say compliments of the new season. It looks like as FP2030, we have started our new year 2024 on a high note with this introduction of the Partnership Fund. I'm looking forward to work closely together in this year 2024, whereby we normalize family planning and also try to make sure that family planning is at the center of the global health agenda. Colleagues, I would like to welcome you to this Partnership Fund launch, where we are looking forward to working together with you to make sure that we kind of resource your efforts to accelerate family planning as partners in different countries. I think you agree with me that we've been having some kind of challenges in terms of resources going towards family planning due to several reasons. Hence, this call for the Partnership Fund to make sure that we encourage domestic resource mobilization by different countries. And we hope that through partnering with you, we can actually try to address the issue of unmet need for family planning by girls and women in different countries across the globe. Colleagues, our partners in actually advancing rights-based family planning, we have witnessed as FP2030 that most of our local partners are not adequately resourced, and this has often resulted in missed opportunities. The present status quo has not only weakened partners in the family planning network, but has resulted in the loss of some potential game-changing solutions. As the only global commitment-based partnership on family planning, FP2030, we are seeking to bring together various partners and be able to close the gap of resources by trying to work together with your partners to catalyze a process of resource mobilization by local countries, by local governments, by local private sector players within our countries. Hence, the small grants we are discussing today will give us an opportunity for recipients of these grants to be able to lead initiatives to solve some of the family planning problems in our different countries we are focusing. This partnership fund is grounded in our core belief that to successfully advance sexual reproductive health rights, we need to ensure that local actors are adequately resourced. So we actually believe that working together with you partners, we can actually do much more in terms of advancing rights-based family planning in different countries. Colleagues, it is our firm belief that our local partners are better positioned to identify and implement local solutions to local problems with regard to family planning. With this, I would like to welcome you to this partnership fund launch, and I would like to encourage you to actively participate, to actively listen, and also to actively ask anything so that at least you get clarity as you prepare to respond to our call for the partnership fund. Thank you, colleagues. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Tagwell, for that. Just a reminder to our audience, utilize the chat to introduce yourself and also utilize the Q&A section to ask any question that is related to this partnership fund. So moving on here, so what is FP2030? So FP2030 is the only global partnership that is focused on family planning, and this singular focus unites a wide range of partners across disciplines and sectors. And together as FP2030, we are putting family planning at the center of global health development and gender equality. With more than 30 governments around the world that have made commitments to FP2030, and by joining FP2030, these governments have demonstrated their commitment by providing their citizens with the necessary resources and support to be able to make informed decisions about their sexual and reproductive health. So FP2030 currently operates under a decentralized hub model where we have 5 regional hubs which work together to form up what we call the FP2030 support network, which is actually the largest community of practice of rights-based family planning advocates in the world. And then the FP2030 structure is designed to be able to support countries through their leadership and meaningful engagement. So within FP2030, we know that for success, this requires a lot of team effort and sustainable development and partnership between government and CSOs. Next slide. Now, looking at the partnership fund, what does it entail? So based on our experience as FP2030, we know that supporting local actors, including the non-traditional ones, will be able to enhance and strengthen local leadership, capacity, accountability, which will ultimately drive impact. So in this context, we do define traditional actors as groups and organizations who have not typically been able to be involved in family planning programming, but the group has interest, knowledge, and potential to be able to influence acceleration or progress towards rights-based family planning. The core issue is that this initiative is able and is aiming to address that local actors are best positioned to be able to identify and implement the local solutions. And we are able to know that this is something that is very important. One thing that we also acknowledge that the local actors are not sufficiently resourced. They don't have access to power and they are not supported to be able to connect with other family planning experts to exchange learning and solutions. So the actors will vary depending on country context and may include people with disabilities, male engagement groups, faith leaders, women-led community organizations, underrepresented groups such as faith groups, ethnic minority groups, private sector representatives, and young influencers. The transformative benefit of engaging such groups is ensuring that local priorities are actually put at the center, communities are empowered in decision-making, and decision makers are responsible and transparent. Next slide. So the partnership fund. So through this initiative, FP 2030's vision is to be able to provide funding opportunities and capacity strengthening to elevate local leadership and allow local organizations to be able to thrive, define their priorities that matter to the communities, design and implement solutions, and foster accountability for the results. Our goal of resourcing locally led sustainable solutions will be powered by catalytic sub-grants. Objective 1, if you can check on your screen, customized organizational capacity strengthening. Objective 2, focusing on being intentional with knowledge exchange and learning throughout. Then FP 2030 is proposing a series of at least having 3 competitive challenges between January 2024, which is just yesterday, and June 2025, which will allow CSOs to secure highly responsive small grants and implement locally led solutions to be able to solve a wide range of key family planning issues. The shared thread across the 3 challenges is the goal of improving the operationalization of rights-based family planning, policies, and strategies by supporting the locally led solution. Each challenge will also include intentional knowledge sharing, learning, and exchange, as well as support for organizational effectiveness and technical capacity strengthening for the selected grantees. So the challenges, of course, will vary in their specific funding priorities, eligibility criteria, and modalities. So the first challenge was launched on January 22nd, and this challenge focuses on supporting domestic resource mobilization efforts in 9 African countries, and we'll be able to discuss this first challenge in the subsequent slides. Next slide. So looking at the operating model, the size of each grant will range between $30,000 US to $60,000 US. 20% of each grant's budget will be earmarked for capacity sharing and networking, of course, networking and learning. Organizational capacity strengthening will be provided to all grantees by a group of regional capacity strengthening specialists. And this organizational strengthening needs will be determined in collaboration with the grantees themselves using an FP 2030 design self-assessment tool at the beginning of each project. Our goal is to be able to be as responsible as possible to local organization needs. Although we don't want to be prescriptive at this stage, we expect local organizations to be able to request for capacity strengthening in the following areas. For instance, smart advocacy techniques, expenditure tracking best practices, governance strengthening, especially for coalitions and consortiums, and then looking at the monitoring and evaluation learning systems, strengthening fundraising and storytelling. Then 10% of each grant's budget will be earmarked for capacity strengthening purposes. Lessons learned from partners supported by FP 2030's fund will systematically be documented and shared across and beyond the FP 2030 partnership. This will be done by providing earmarked funding and networking opportunities to partners to be able to present their work in various national, regional, and international platforms. For instance, the National Technical Working Group meetings, that is national, FP 2030 Regional Focal Point Workshop, that is regional, international conferences such as ICFP and Women Deliver, those are international platforms, to be able to participate for provide country-to-country exchanges. So in addition, we hope that the decentralized structure will allow partners to take advantage of the FP 2030's communities of practice, the centers of excellence, to be able to develop what we call compelling case studies that are relatable to the regional landscape. We will utilize virtual webinars such as this one and convenings as a way of convening stakeholders to share learnings. 10% of each of the grants budget, again, will be earmarked for networking and learning purposes, and these activities will be decided at the beginning of the project. So we can move on to the next slide. So in this slide, what you're seeing is that the slide shows that FP 2030 is planning 3 distinct challenges between January 2024 and June 2025. The first challenge, which I'm discussing right now, was launched on January 22nd, and you're able to see a blast on social media and even the website. And this challenge is actually focusing on domestic resource mobilization in 9 African countries, as I mentioned earlier. Then the second challenge is currently being designed as we are speaking at the moment, and will be able to be published by the end of next month, that is March. And we expect that 10 or so African and Asian countries will be eligible for the second challenge. Please stay tuned and regularly check FP2030's website, social media channels, to make sure that you don't miss the next announcement of the next challenge. As a reminder, each challenge will also include intentional knowledge sharing, learning and exchange, as well as support organizational effectiveness and capacity. So, of course, as I mentioned, the challenges will vary again on 3 things based on the funding priorities, eligibility criteria, and modalities. Please feel free to be able to submit your questions using the Q&A box, and also continue having introduction in the chat. Next slide. So the first challenge, which I'm talking about, let's now focus on the first challenge, which was recently launched on January 22nd. The objective of this challenge is to be able to provide catalytic small grants to civil society organizations, youth-led groups, faith-based organizations, and non-traditional actors in 9 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. The expected outcome of this first challenge is to be able to enhance budgetary allocation for family planning, so that countries are increasingly able to sustainably finance their family planning work and transparently track their expenditures in line with their FP2030 financial commitments. Through this challenge, funding recipients will also receive earmarked funds for technical support to strengthen the organizational capacity, share lessons, and take advantage of networking opportunities. Looking at the budget, so the total amount available for this challenge, which is what we are calling the first challenge of domestic resource mobilization, what we have is 420,000 USD, and this is the total amount available for grants, and not the maximum per grant. So all those grants that will come under this challenge, there is a budget of 420,000 USD. So in total, we expect to award between 12 and 15 grants as part of the first challenge. This first challenge, of course, has been funded by Mark for Mothers. We thank them for this generous support. So unfortunately, organizations which are allocated outside the 9 countries, which are listed, as you can see on the slide, are not eligible for this particular challenge. We expect that there will be a rotation of eligible countries in the subsequent challenges, second and third. Therefore, if your country is not eligible in this particular case, it might be eligible in future. Keep looking out for the next challenges. Next slide. So what are we looking for? So what we're looking for is that we are looking to get applications from smaller grassroots organizations facing challenges in accessing funding. And these organizations having a priority, focusing on youth-led organization, women-led. We do not expect to directly support large international NGOs during this challenge. So the international NGOs may apply as a partner within a coalition or consortium of partners that are Southern-based, where relevant. And FP2030 will prioritize non-traditional actors, as I earlier mentioned, including the youth-led groups, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and feminist organizations. So what are we looking for? Introduce a new idea or an innovative approach, aiming to gather insights into effectiveness of promising practices that have demonstrated initial success. So we are looking for best practices and innovation around this area. So contribute to a civic dialogue between civil society and the duty bearers or the policy makers, so that we are able to strengthen the capacity and conversation around governance, working with coalitions. So applications as a consortia are possible. Please refer to the RFP for more details on for this specific request. So align the financing priorities set by the governments in their commitments. And for example, look at the FP2030 commitments, the GFF investment cases, UNFPA compact agreements, ICPD commitments, and many more. So that should actually be able to provide some guidance on what we are looking for. Next slide. Good. So this slide looks at some of the resources that can provide you with more information. My colleagues will be able to put their links in the chat so that you can follow through and get to know on what that is all about. But I can just mention the first is looking at the high impact practices. We strongly suggest reviewing the best practices as described in the HIPS brief, which is on the domestic public financing. So the purpose of this brief is to be able to support family planning programmers, including implementers and advocates, to be able to increase the value of public expenditure by improving budget allocation for FP in both national and sub-national budgets. So check out for the links in the chat box. Thank you so much, John, for putting the links in the chat box. The second resource is Smart Advocacy Tool. So the Smart Advocacy is an approach that is adopted by the Advanced Family Planning, that is AFP initiative, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So the Smart Advocacy approach has been applied in very many areas, including DRM. So look out for that one also. Then the third resource we are seeing there is the family planning spending assessment. Again, my colleagues will be able to put the link in the chat. Kindly take a keen look into this resource. It can be able to give you insights on exactly what you're looking for and give you more guidance on what should be able to help your challenge to be funded. Next slide. Good. So can move on to the next slide. Good. So here what you have is looking at what you're funding, DRM, and all those specific things that you're looking for, but also looking at what we cannot be able to fund. One, direct and grassroots lobbying activities. And of course, those are defined as you can see on the slide. Direct lobbying refers to communication with the legislature that expresses a view about specific legislation. Grassroots lobbying, communication with the public that expresses a view about a specific legislation and includes a call to action. So that wouldn't be funded by this grant. Unclear awareness raising or sensitization activities without a well-defined influencing and follow-up strategy. So something that is not very clear there. Then purchase and or distribution of contraceptive products. So this grant is not looking at that. Next slide. So this is of importance, eligibility criteria. Whom are we looking for? So your organization will need to be registered in the country you are applying. You are planning to implement. You are planning to implement your project in, and you must have a bank account, and it should be legally registered. So all that information is required. If you are not so sure about eligibility criteria, please feel free to contact us in the email address that is being shown on the slide, partnershipfund@fp2030.org. Next slide. So here we have the grant structure. It's good to know what exactly will be financed and up to what level. So we have already received several questions on how the partnership fund will be structured. So what you're seeing in this on the slide is the structure. It's important to remember that the maximum amount that you can receive through this challenge is a maximum of 60,000 USD for a period of 12 months. So we are looking for projects that will be implemented for 12 months. So that being said, we expect that majority of the awards, of course, will be in between there, between 30,000 to 50,000 USD. And then we have the first structure is looking at the program costs. So this will make up or should ideally make up the bulk of the grant total budget. And that those costs will include the approved project activities directly responding to the request for proposal priorities. For instance, advocacy activities, developing of the scorecards, meeting of officials and all that. That will form up the program cost. But they can also include associated staffing costs, up to 30% of all program costs, and then administrative costs up to 10% of all program costs. The second one is looking at the capacity strengthening costs. So what we have here, partnership fund recipients will receive earmarked funds, as I earlier mentioned, to support capacity strengthening. Then specific organization capacity capacity strengthening needs will be identified by the funding recipients at the beginning of the project. I think I did talk about this in my earlier slides. Finally, the third cost is looking at the learning and networking cost. So the partnership fund recipients will also have earmarked funding to participate in the networking opportunities. Again, I did talk about this earlier. Next slide. So thank you so much. So what we are seeing here in the slide is what we call an illustrative example. Ideally, what we expect to have as a budget and with a list of the activities that you plan to do being illustrative. So the total budget is make sure that it's under 60,000 USD, which is acceptable for this grant. So if you put a budget of more than 60,000 USD, of course, that will not be accepted. So the staffing cost should be under 30% of all program costs as required. Admin cost should be under 10% of the total program cost. Capacity strengthening cost at 10% of the total grant amount. And then learning and networking cost 10% of the total grant amount. Let me clarify something here. The admin costs and the staffing costs are tied to the overall program cost, whereas the capacity strengthening and learning and networking are tied to the total grant percentage or amount. Thank you. So therefore, this is ideally what we'll be looking for. And please remember that only shortlisted applicants will be invited to be able to submit their full budget. You don't need to submit a full budget in your EOA or expression of interest. Next slide. So the application process, as you can see in the slide, the two-step expression of interest. Then, so FP2030 runs a two-step process to identify grantees consisting of an EOI, then followed up by submission of the full application. Then the expression of interest consists of a brief concept that addresses the problem, look at the problem, should be able to address the context, the project objectives, expected results, and how success will be measured. That's very important. So it's good to look at that. Then, of course, all EOIs must be submitted via the email partnershipfund@fp2030.org. So remember, if you're submitting your expression of interest, don't use any email address apart from the one that I've mentioned, the partnership fund. My colleagues will be able to put the email address in the chat where you'll be able to submit all this, but also it's in your RFQs. So next slide. Also noting that the applications for complete applications can be submitted in English. Let me emphasize, French or Portuguese. Those are the ones that we consider. So in this slide, it's a timeline. What you're looking at is actually taking a keen look at that timeline. I earlier mentioned that the partnership fund was launched on 22nd. So currently we are having 2 webinars. This is the first webinar, the Anglophone webinar. Look out for the French webinar, which is planned for in the next few days. But also to take a keen note on the deadline of the expression of interest. It is on February 11th, 2024, midnight, yeah, GMT time. So I've already mentioned about the deadline of submitting the full application. You can be able to check on that. So the full application deadline is on March 4th, but for expression of interest is on 11th. And all awardees will be notified by 31st March of this year. Next slide. Good. So the selection criteria, we are looking at all submitted applications will be screened by FP2030 for compliance with eligibility criteria. Then during the application review, we'll be using the following criteria to be able to ensure that everything is as required. So we'll be looking at the relevance to the scope of funding and thematic priorities. That is very important. You might have a good proposal. It's not focusing on DRM. It will not be taken forward. Credibility and demonstrated experience from the applicants. We want to know what's happening in the space and the kind of work that you've been doing before and the kind of innovation that you have around the area. Estimated potential of the project to add value in the SRHR landscape. That's very important. And then actually, we're looking at the aspect of being able to respond to the local needs in your country. Of course, value for money is very, very important. So FP2030 will award at least 30% of available funds to non-traditional actors. I was able to define whom we are referring as non-traditional actors. These are players who have not been in the FP space or who are not implementing the FP space, but they have an idea of how they can contribute to the family planning space. That's very important to note. So we implement a participatory and transparent process to assess all applications and making funding decisions. That's very important to note. And of course, we are looking at having a validation committee consisting of 5 independent members. This group will be established to review all proposals, of course, with the recommendation from FP2030, and then we'll be able to have what we call the validation committee's decisions are final and cannot be field. Next slide. I think at this point, we've come to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for listening to me. And we open to questions if there are any. My colleagues, if there are any questions in the chat or the Q&A, please let me be able to see them. And yeah, there was a question about the French webinar. The French webinar is planned for February 6th. I think, if I'm not wrong, that should be the case. If we have French audience in the current webinar, and we'll be able to get the details about the webinar. So full information about the fund. There is a link that has been put by my colleague Veronica. If you want to have full information about this partnership fund, please feel free to be able to check into the link. Can you email us the presentation? Yes, the team will be able to work on that for all attendees who are registered for the webinar. Let me see if we have any other questions. And also, so there's a question around, I was wondering if this fund will be available only for African countries. That's a question that came from one of the participants. So the response is, as I presented in the slide, only the countries, the 9 countries that were mentioned, those are the ones that are eligible for this particular challenge and this particular point. But remember that we are having the second challenge and the third challenge. Please be on the lookout. Maybe your country might be a beneficiary of that grant. So just to re-emphasize the countries that are participating in this grant, we have Cameroon, Central African Republic, Liberia, Mali, Mozambique, Rwanda, Togo, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. Okay, so let me see. So what are the criteria for selecting the 9 countries? Thank you so much. So thank you so much for the question. So the decision regarding the selection of the countries was based on the consultation with key stakeholders in the region with an internal analysis of domestic resource mobilization needs in countries. So in this particular case, your country might not have been selected, maybe because they have some advancement on the DRM agenda in the country, and also what has been identified as a key need within your country, the FP2030 country commitments. So good, as I mentioned earlier, the PowerPoint, you'll be able to receive these slides for all those attendees who are present or registered. They'll be able to receive the slides thereafter. Okay, so let me see. Good. So I see a question around the learning cost. As I earlier mentioned in the slides, remember that the partnership recipients will be able to receive earmarked funds for organizational capacity strengthening as part of the award. And remember, we talked about the percentages being 10% of the total grant amount. So that is very important for organizational capacity strengthening learning. Okay, let me check on which countries are eligible. I think I've been able to communicate about that. And then my colleagues will be able, kindly, if you can be able to put the list of the countries in case someone joined the webinar a little bit late. Put the list of the countries in the chat that are eligible for this particular grant. So there's a question around defining the size of the organization on a traditional actor, whether that applies. So we don't use a specific definition for this. We do not expect to directly support large NGOs for this grant. Remember, the main objective is to be able to fund locally led organizations or organizations that are solving local problems. That is one of the first criteria that you're looking for. And here you are looking at youth-led organizations at the community level, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, feminist organizations that are responding to the larger family planning agenda. So I was able to share that the illustrative budget as an example. Let me see if there is any other question. I'm currently checking on the questions in the Q&A. Yes, there's a question. There's a question in the chat. If someone can apply as a consortium, yes. If you can apply as a consortium, that is very true. But remember, you should have the prime leading this process. And of course, in the proposal, it should be clearly stated what is the role of the other partners or the other consortium partner who's going to be part of this application. That's so much welcome, as long as the roles and responsibilities of the other partners are actually stated within the application. Okay, I don't see. Let me see if there's any other question. So that is answered for now. So I see a question, what role is FP2030 playing during the implementation? That's a very good question. FP2030 will play a couple of roles. First of all, being the first role is being the point of contact, is in case you need some clarity on what exactly you should be looking out for, or what are your challenges when it comes to implementation and all that. So FP2030 will provide some guidance on that. And we also mentioned that we'll be able to provide learning sessions, such as webinars, such as this one, to be able to provide more information on exactly what you're looking for and how implementation should look like. And in case you are experiencing any challenges in between the period of implementing your grant, that is 12 months, feel free to reach out to FP2030 through the email address, which I believe was shared in the chat, partnershipsfund@fp2030.org. That is the platform you're going to use to make all your requests regarding the partnership fund. So let me see another question. So tons of capacity building through organizational capacity, talk more about this. I'll refer you to our website. We have been able to provide more information about what exactly we mean by this. So be on the lookout. Be a friend to our website. Visit the website. Visit the partnership fund link. And of course, more continuous updates will be made through that platform for you to be able to get more information. I think that is very important for you to take note. Utilize the link and the email address that have been put in the chat. Do we have a template or any format for UI? Yes. You will be able to, in the expression of interest, get all the information that is required. And actually, let me just continue emphasizing, utilize the link. If there's any more updates regarding any request that you have, all that information will be updated in the website. In case there is need for that information to go out, please utilize that link. Can you please explain how we could lobby our governments to respect their commitments towards FP2030 without advocacy activities targeting government? Thank you so much for that question. Remember, the focus here is looking on DRM. When you are working with governments, one of the most important things to remember is that a financial commitment is one of the commitments that governments have actually made to FP 2030. You should be able to look at your contribution as a civil society organization, as a youth-led organization. What is your contribution into that specific commitment? That is very important. So that, remember, here we are talking about mutual accountability. That's very important. And your contribution to that commitment is very important. Good. I'm seeing a question around is Central Asia not eligible? Thank you so much for this question. For this particular challenge, the first challenge is focusing on Sub-Saharan Africa. In the second and third challenges, there is a potential that we are going to have countries from Asia and also Africa participating in these challenges. So the criteria is looking at the low and mid-income countries. Of course, look out for the second and third challenges. Maybe your country might be able to make it to the list. I don't think I have any other question in the Q&A. I think most of the questions have been responded to. Anything from the chat I might need to be aware of? I don't see any other question that is open. I think that's done. Thank you so much, participants, for your questions. That is very good. Keep them coming. Let me see what else we have. Anything in the chat? So there's a question around the 60,000 USD as per the application is irrespective whether you are working as an individual organization or a consortium. So remember, yeah, that's very true. So you can apply as an individual organization or as a coalition or consortium. But remember what I mentioned earlier, the most important thing, if you are applying as a coalition or consortium, the application can only be made by one organization, that is the prime. But also in the application, we say that let's know the specific roles of the other partners within this project. That is the most important thing. Remember, the focus is on domestic resource mobilization, how your grant will be able to solve the DRM challenges that we have in Sub-Saharan Africa. That's the other thing to watch out for. So any reasons, objective, the selection criteria? I think I've responded to this question. This was based on the consultation that FP 2030 held with partners across the region, and also looking at the commitments that countries have committed to FP 2030, looking at those commitments and the countries that have actually identified domestic resource mobilization to be a key challenge in their countries. So that is something that was considered, but look out for the next subsequent challenges. Challenge number 2, challenge number 3, maybe your country will be a beneficiary in this. And we look forward to rotate the eligibility, the eligible countries for the next and subsequent funding challenges. Good. I think that's fine. I don't have any other questions. So yes, at this point, Chad is not eligible, and I think my colleagues have been able to share the list of the countries, but be a friend to our website and the link as I mentioned. So we can maybe, my colleague, maybe you can move on to just one more slide or two, just so that we are able to address some of the things that have been mentioned. Next slide. Yes, so I think there's a question that I saw in the chat from one of the participants. I think it's Halima, if I'm able to see the names here, about the consortium. So the application from the consortia are possible, as I mentioned, as long as the roles and responsibilities are clearly stated. That's very important. But remember, the application can only be submitted by one organization or the prime. That is very important. And then there are no limits to the number of organizations in a consortium. If you want to work with 5 organizations, 15, 10, 20, but a very strategic kind of application and the role of each partner. Next slide. So this one is looking at can international NGOs. I think I've been able to respond to that. You can check on the next slide. Let's see what we have. Yes, I think there was a question on what kind of capacity strengthening we'll be able to provide as FP2030. I saw that question. So FP2030 is your home and house to be able to get capacity strengthening on smart advocacy. FP2030 will provide that through various platforms. Expenditure tracking analysis, that is support you can get from FP2030 also. Governance strengthening, M&D, fundraising, storytelling. So I think that is very important. Good. I think you can go back to the discussion slide. That is fine. So up to this point, then, I think we are aligned in terms of what is coming up. Now looking at the next steps. So from here, we will have looked at the partnership fund. We have given you information. This was an info webinar for you to be able to know what exactly this first challenge is all about. And if you have any questions, it's good that you've responded to them. If you have any further questions, even beyond this webinar, feel free to submit them in the email that was shared. That's the only email that will be able to handle any questions, any concerns, or any clarification that are needed regarding this particular partnership fund challenge. So I think that is important. What I want all of us to take note of is on the deadline. The deadline for this particular challenge, for you to be able to submit your applications or expression of interest, is on February 11th, 2024, midnight, GMT. So GMT, February 11th, midnight, that's the deadline for submitting this particular application. And remember, invitation of all shortlisted candidates will be made to the, invitation of shortlisted candidates to be able to submit the full application. That will be done by or on February 16th, 2024. That's important, an important date to also take note of. And then remember that the deadline to submit the full application for the successful applicants is on March 4th, midnight again, GMT time. Everything is midnight GMT time. Then awards notification for all those successful applicants, they will be able to be notified by the end of March 2024, which is March 31st, 2024. So I think that is important to take note of. Those are very critical deadlines, and they are very important for you to take note of. So with that, let me see whether there is anything else. Also, good. Remember to take note of the resources, the 3 resources that we shared. I'm hoping that the links were shared in the chat box. So make use of the 3 resources that were shared as you are looking forward to submit your application for this particular challenge. That is very important for you to be able to ensure that you are aligned and you also know what is it that is important to FP2030 in terms of what you are looking for to get in your application. Again, that is very important. So my colleagues will be able to share the three links for the resources. For those ones who joined a little bit late, for you to be able to have access to those particular links. So I think that is important as at now. Let me see. Good. Just again to re-emphasize or to make clarity, only applications that will be submitted in English, French, or Portuguese Those are the ones that will be accepted for this particular partnership fund challenge. So take note of that. I know we have different participants from different countries who speak different languages, but take note of the language of submission. That is very important. Okay. I think we have been able to address all the questions in the Q&A, and then in the chat. Also to note, we'll be able to get the recording of this particular webinar. So watch out for that, especially if you joined in a few minutes late into the webinar. We'll be able to get the full recording of the webinar. Yeah, I see a question about Kenya. Unfortunately, Kenya is not eligible for this particular challenge, but watch out for the subsequent challenges. Maybe Kenya will be an eligible country. Yeah, so for the recording of the webinar, look out the website. You'll be able to find a link for the recording and also the FP2030 YouTube channel. So my emphasis once more is to be able to utilize FP2030 social media channel, FP2030 website, FP2030 YouTube channel for you to be able to actually get more information and any updates that you might come your way before the deadline of February 11th. So be on the lookout of what's happening on our social media channels, and also get to know what exactly is FP2030 intervening on in the different regional hubs, as I mentioned earlier in my first slide. Okay, so I think for those ones who joined late, we have the 3 links of the resources, and the resources, you can find the resource in English, French, and English and French, and also the links, the link to the partnership fund. That is very, very important for you. And remember to be able to utilize the website for that. Thank you so much. So as part of closing, we've come to the end of the webinar. And thank you so much, participants, for being part of this conversation. This is very important to have you here. FP2030, we are very deliberate in working with and through our local organizations to be able to come up with what we call locally led solutions, solving the global problems. I think that's very important. In this particular partnership fund challenge, we have particularly focused on domestic resource mobilization, in other language, health financing. How do we work towards the journey of self-reliance as partners who are working in low and mid-income countries? We know that the donor space is shrinking. We should be innovative to be able to find solutions to our local problems. So with this, we've come to the end of the webinar. I thank everyone for joining this webinar, especially the participants joining from the different parts of the world. And look out for more information on our website, and also reach out through the email provided, the partnership fund at fp2030.org, if you have any questions or you need more information or any clarity about the partnership fund. Thank you so much. I've been your host, Alex Omari, FP2030 Eastern Southern Africa Regional Hub. Together, I've had my colleagues on the call who have been on the back end to ensure that we have a very successful webinar. All the best. Have a good morning, a good afternoon, a good evening, a good night from wherever you are joining us from any part of the world. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.